evening, everyone. Tonight I want to talk about how we can sometimes assign meaning to noise. And to help me explain what I mean, I'm going to read some short passages from a book. This book is titled Another Kind of Freedom. The chapter that I am reading from is called Cosmic Joke. In order to cut through the ambition of ego, we must understand how we set up me and my territory, how we use our projections as credentials to prove our existence. The source of the effort to confirm our solidity is an uncertainty as to whether or not we exist. To prove our own existence by finding a reference point outside ourselves, something with which to have a relationship, something solid to feel separate from. The resultant sense of the solidity of I and other is a gigantic hoax, which all of us tend to fall for. This hoax is the fundamental dualistic fixation that governs our lives, what he later refers to as the dualistic barrier. We do not realize that the whole process of trying to avoid groundlessness is unnecessary, that we do not need a floor to stand on. There was never any danger of falling. In fact, trying to secure our ground is the biggest joke of all, a cosmic joke. The chapter goes on to describe a 5-step process in which the ego engages in order to establish this solidity, this reference point that is outside of ourselves. And I remember recently coming across a situation where I had realized that my ego was going through the exact same process and assigning meaning to noise. This happened when I was finishing up a practice session at my archery club, and at the end of the session, I felt myself growing quite hungry, and I waved goodbye to my coach and to my fellow club members, got back into my car, and just sat there with the AC on because it was such a hot day. I needed to wait for the car to cool down before I was going to drive home. Eventually, the car cooled down enough for me to drive. And as I was driving, I suddenly was aware of this growing negative feeling that I was getting. And I was a little confused about the existence of this negative feeling. And almost immediately, my mind jumped to assigning the negative energy towards archery, because I had thought to myself, was I getting bored of archery? Or am I becoming less enthusiastic about archery? Which, that thought confused me, because I thought it was something that I really liked and that I could see myself continuing. And these thoughts didn't really come out of nowhere. These thoughts came from an understanding that oftentimes I can suffer from shiny object syndrome, where something is so fresh and new, and it feels good because it's so fresh and new, but over time will lose its luster and its sparkle, and interest will also fade at the same rate. And so in order to understand why I had felt that I was potentially losing interest in archery, I decided to cast my mind back to during the session and asking myself, well, what did I feel then while I was actively practicing? And I remember feeling quite content and quite proud of my progress so far. I had exceeded my expectations that I had set going into the session. And so overall, the practice session was a good one. And so that contradiction to what I was feeling in the car jolted me and made me realize, oh, you know where this bad feeling came from? I said it earlier. I was hungry. And when you're hungry, you will feel bad because your brain is urging you to sustain itself, which I guess is the whole reason why we have, in English at least, the term hangry. I was simply hangry, and yet it was the perfect example of how I had begun to assign noise that my body was giving me meaning. I had thought I was losing interest in archery simply because I was hungry. Almost quite humorously, as I was just recounting this story to you all, I realized that this example of mine quite mirrors that infamous Snickers bar commercial where they say to have a Snickers bar because you're not quite yourself. And I felt that that's exactly what I did to myself, which was just handing myself a mental Snickers bar and realizing that I was just not being myself because I was hungry. Which, to clarify, I'm not saying that to endorse Snickers or to say anything negative about Snickers either. But I just found it quite humorous that it quite mirrors that commercial. And so I think that a lot of times I have assigned meaning to noise where I struggle to detangle them because it's so instinctive to piece together these individual signals into something coherent, into a story or into evidence to help me confirm a conclusion that I already made in my head. I find that I do this a lot with people, where perhaps I'm just taking how my body reacts to a stimuli. So it's not quite associated to what kind of person they are. Say, they're wearing a hot pink colored shirt, and I'm quite sensitive to bright visuals. And so neon anything is quite glaring to me. And so my body will, I guess, faintly recoil from anyone who's wearing neon hot pink. And so, for example, I would take that noise and then assign it to what kind of person that they are, which is just simply inaccurate because I'm not realizing that I'm just reacting to an unpleasant stimuli, but it really has nothing to do with the personality or what kind of person they are. So if you have ever found yourself subconsciously assigning meaning to noise, perhaps inadvertently judging someone based off of something that's not quite related to how they are, I understand how tangled all these thoughts and all these signals can be. So I want to invite everyone to just breathe with me, just slowly, and let's comb through these mental tangles. Just gently raking through the tangles that can sometimes appear in our minds. We're not quite cutting them off. So, no scissors will be making an appearance today. We're just simply trying to detangle any of these noises, these signals, these thoughts that perhaps are just confirming some false stories about ourselves, about other people, about certain situations. And if you are realizing that perhaps, yes, you have been assigning meaning to noise, it's okay. So, this is where I'm going to end this video. I hope that you have enjoyed this energy tending video. Thank you for joining me once again, and I hope you all have a very good rest of your evening. Goodbye.